Welcome back to Beer with Nat. This isn't a return to our regularly scheduled programming just yet. This is part 2 of Beer Nation 2020, a podcast collaboration that looks back on the year in beer here in the UK. If you haven't listened to part 1, scroll down on your podcast feed and start there to hear more about the idea behind the collaboration, the podcasters involved, and what we chat about. For those of you who have listened to part 1, I won't keep you waiting any longer. This is Beer Nation 2020 part 2.
We sit and talk into microphones, sometimes with nobody else around. We spend hours cutting up little bits of audio because we are that into beer and podcasting. And I suppose, Steve, something that you said right at the beginning when we talked about when you came together 5 years ago, you had 6 people around the table, and then you made the point that now there's more than 50 beer podcasts in the UK. I had no idea there were so many beer podcasts.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, really. I think we've seen a lot of them actually start during the lockdown period as well, and I think that's just the consequence of people having more time on their hands and wanting to maybe go a little bit further into their hobby and see where they can take it. And I think that's fantastic. Trying to keep up with them all. I will say I don't listen to every single one of them, but we do try and stay on top of them because we have a directory on our website of all of the beer podcasts that are available. But yeah, it's fantastic to see new ones cropping up and how people take them on different slants as well. So I think probably all of us here today all have a slightly different slant on what we do and a slightly different way of doing it. And I think that's great because there is literally something for everyone out there at the moment.
There certainly is, isn't it? And it's interesting that you mentioned sort of lockdown, that a few of them have sprung up during lockdown. What has people's experience been of podcasting during lockdown? Adam?
I think it's probably the same for everyone, is just making use of technology that was probably already there. I had Zoom on my phone as an app, and I'm thinking, what have I used that for? And then I realised there was some use of once ever in the last year. But I think it just made everyone realise that you don't have to be next to each other, and the quality of the recording is virtually exactly the same as long as you've got something to record through, being a microphone. But yeah, it's been the one thing that's kind of been eye-opening is we always recorded in a pub, round a table, and I suppose it's something we've lost, to be honest, is that chat round a pub kind of vibe. And a lot of our feedback's always been, it feels like we're kind of there with you sometimes, having a drink and stuff. I mean, that's been lost, but what's been given us an opportunity is we're not having to get people who live locally to come and join us. You talked about, speaking to people, the other side of the world. And it's very easy for us to kind of go, hey guys from London, do you want to join us tomorrow? And there's no like, well, I need to get a train ticket and then all that stuff. It's quite instant. And I think having it as a video thing as well, you still get that kind of, you can see eye to eye, you can see people's reactions. You still get that, you're not just over audio, just trying to guess what people's reactions are. You can tell a lot from a face. And I think that's something we've taken. And, we've upped our output to, but now we're going weekly, but now 2 weekly, where we once a monthly podcast. And we're also making use of putting the video stream on YouTube, which we never did again. So it's just opening an extra avenue, which it's not cost us any more money. It's cost us less because we're not traveling around. But yeah, it's been eye opening, and it's had virtually all positives, apart from not being able to drink in the pub and see your friends. But yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that. I mean, we've all sung the praises of Zoom and the ability to connect in a time when we have to just sit in our homes or spare rooms. But that video piece has been really interesting and new, especially as a podcaster as well. I'm happy that no one needs to see me. But this idea of how quickly the industry responded and kind of really engaged with live streaming, and the fact that we could all of a sudden hear from brewers around the world or people in the beer industry in all different roles in their homes and in this very relaxed and sort of intimate environment, have been able to have these conversations beforehand. So I think for me, really seeing how people instantly moved to something like IGTV and used Instagram to have these conversations with brewers, and as I said, beer personalities, really, it's been really fun to watch those and really see how quickly people were able to make that happen. Like Gabriele Bertucci, for example, he did his digital beer streams for I think about 8 weeks, maybe more, 4 days a week, making sure that you had company if you were, perhaps by yourself and you're a fan of the beer industry. You could tune in every Monday through Thursday at 6 p.m. and watch his live stream. the fact that there was someone so committed to put something like that out there for all of us to stay connected has been really nice to watch during the pandemic.
I was going to say, admittedly, I think we seem to have gone the other way. So it's amazing what people have done, how they've taken advantage of the sort of online work. We seem to have gone a little bit the other way in that our output has been somewhat limited this year. And obviously we've had, obviously Tom and Ashley are new fathers, so they've obviously had that to deal with as well. But in terms of our online episodes, I think we've only done about 4 or 5. And we know it's the perfect time, as Adam said, it's the perfect time to get guests on the show. And, you know, for whatever reason, we haven't really capitalized on that. I think that's just on our part. But as you say, it is amazing to see the work that people are doing online in terms of, you know, still being able, as you say, it's a sense of community, and to be able to bring all of that community together in such a way online has definitely been a plus point in an otherwise quite a grim year. Yeah.
It's made the world a little bit smaller, hasn't it? That's the thing. Going online, as you know, to echo what everyone said, it's been much easier for us to bring guests into the show, because it doesn't matter if they're at the other end of the country. It doesn't matter if they're in a different country, because you can work with the time difference. But as long as you can get them online and you can get them on a video, then you've got an opportunity to chat to them. And I think that has been, in a year of very few positives, that's been one of the very big ones, is that we've got to talk to more people as a result of, well, the world moving online.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, the fact that I think we had one of our most expensive episodes ever to record was going up to pilot in Edinburgh, because we had to obviously pay for train fare, accommodation, you know, keeping Dan in beers. It was quite expensive. But then this year we got to record with, you know, one of my favorite breweries from the past 3 years, because we could do it over Zoom. It was phenomenal. It's you know, straight away we could just get Dan from Wonder Beyond on the chat, and it wasn't that awkward, even though we'd never met each other in real life before. It was actually really nice, and I think, yeah, like, we've massively expanded out the guests we've been able to have. Slightly changed tact. I'm surprised there's not more beer TikTok, though, in lockdown. I'm just saying. We've seen a little bit of Instagram. I think maybe that the craft beer scene is just slightly getting older, and the young people aren't coming in. So, you know.
Well, there's an opening for you there, Luke.
Oh, I'm trying. There's no. Actually, it's a real shame that Stephen from Points of Brew isn't on here, because after having a good search on TikTok, he's literally the only UK beer TikToker. And I have no idea who watches his TikToks, but...
I was going to say, have you checked the demographic for a TikTok? Are they actually under 18 and can't drink anyway? Yeah, my point is, I was thinking about it before, but Luke just talked about awkwardness over, you know, be no awkwardness. And I'm going to use the phrase new normal, because we use that. But not just for us as producers, but people who are used to sat in front of screens and talking to people via video, or seeing faces in this sort of this way, and also maybe just being a little bit more lenient to slight technical glitches and things which you can't rely on internet connection. You that's not something you can control, and occasionally you might lose a bit of audio, you might get the odd blip and stuff. And I think that because everyone's so tuned into it and been doing it in their own jobs and in their own personal lives, that it's helped us a little bit. And I think it will continue in some format. I mean, we'll be dying to go back in the pub, and I'm sure Laura will agree, but there will be times where it's just not going to be convenient, and we can just drop back into this format, and people are just used to it. People are used to it. Everyone's used to it. So I think, yeah, that's another kind of taking point, I think, for the last, 9 months, is it now?
Yeah, I think, like, Adam makes such a great point, especially in spaces. You know, if we think pre this year about beer Twitter or beer Instagram, in beer Twitter, there's so many hot takes. People are so quick to respond and perhaps start a bit of a fight. Conversation, I should say, but sometimes a bit of a fight. When Instagram, you know, we need everything to be so polished. People have been so forgiving of each other this year. And that's been really wonderful to see, that we can actually just share what we love about beer. And it's all about connecting with each other and creating community. And for me as well, you know, over Google Meet and then Zoom, I have created a community and built a new business over lockdown, which has been something I never expected. Literally, you know, I had my book launch that unfortunately was canceled because it was back in March, and I started an online book club on Google Meet. And I just put a link out to the world, probably not what you're advised to do these days now that we're all used to it. But back in April, I put a link out to the world and I had people join me and, you know, built a mailing list over weeks of then offering from book club this lockdown beer school, that we had 150 people on that mailing list just from Twitter and Instagram, and people wanting to come together and chat about beer on a Thursday night.
Exactly. And, you know, you've been doing your beer school online. Will that continue online, do you think, after, you know, with even when we can go back to meeting face to face?
I sure hope so. I mean, I've got 50 people signed up to go again in January after the 50 people that took it this fall. And I really think, you know, I had people calling in from Brazil and America as well as the UK. And it's this idea of really making beer education more accessible that has really enlightened me with the lockdown period, to realize that what I would normally do in person, we can totally do over Zoom, and we can totally do with many people from whatever their background or wherever they're dialing in from.
Absolutely. And Mark?
I was just going to say, I know we've got one editor among us in Steve, but in terms of, you know, being able to broadcast these podcasts, to be able to edit them and share them out, the one thing I have found, as much as I do miss being in the same room as Ashley and Tom and having a beer with them, I have found it a lot easier to be able to get these shows together and be able to put them out to the world. I didn't know for any of the other editors out there how you found it in terms of being able to, you know, very quickly be able to get this stuff out in terms of the online stuff that we do.
In saying that, though, I have to say that there's a lot more people I've found who need to invest in some good recording gear. It's actually, I think that it's, you know, as a side point away from COVID, and this general point is, it's funny actually, we've had a massive proliferation of beer podcasters over the last few years, and there's just so many of us now, which is fantastic. I'm waiting for that next step up into the, like, professional podcasters who come through. So I think we've really, I don't know, actually, I'd be interested to see what other people think, but in like the last 5 years, the only one that for me sort of stands up at that NPR level of podcasting is We Made a Beer from a couple years ago, who put out a season or two and then disappeared. And so I'm just wondering, you know, I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next sort of 5 years is how beer podcasting progresses.
I think I wanted to ask something about that, and particularly to Nat, actually, how, you know, podcasting, broadcasting has gone up, particularly in, so we had the British Guild of Beer Writers Awards the other night, and I can't count how many people who won for podcast material in all the different categories, you know, in sustainability, it was a podcast that won. In lockdown, it was a podcast that won. Online, you know, there was so many places where podcasts are being taken seriously. Have podcasts, do you think, you know, you can get laughed at as a podcaster, oh, you've got a podcast, but actually, are they gaining more respect now, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think we have you to thank for that, Emma, as being recognized as the Beer Writer of the Year back in 2018 for your podcast work and your broadcast work. And then, of course, with Johnny Garrett being recognized last year for all of the amazing things that he does on YouTube with the Craft Beer Channel, his podcast as well. And I think it is that, just sort of people seeing that there are multiple ways to communicate about beer. And sometimes, whether it is audio, whether it is video, we can engage in totally different ways. It doesn't have to just be drinking the beer, chatting to our friends about it, reading about it. There are lots of other ways that we can engage in beer and bring people into the experience. And that's really, I think, where audio and video as well are so different. Because as you've often said, this is such an intimate experience for people to listen. They've got their headphones in, they're doing it on their own. You know, they're practically in the Zoom room with us at the moment. And I think that has really allowed people to kind of realize, oh, I've got my community here. These are my people. They love beer as much as I do. I want to know who they are. I want to engage with them. And I think that's really elevated how we speak about beer through these different mediums.
Absolutely. Steve?
I think Nat's bang on there. You know, there are a lot of mediums now that we can get the message out. And just to also quickly answer Luke's question, I think we are beginning to see that next level of podcasts coming through now. I think if you look at what Matt Curtis is doing with Pellicle, that's beginning to take podcasts to a new level. But what I wanted to do was actually to kind of spin it a little bit, Emma, because you've been doing a fantastic job of hosting, but you've not really had an opportunity to talk about what you do. And obviously you've for years you've done the fantastic work with Fermentation Radio, but recently you've just transitioned into doing some video stuff on YouTube. So what was your thinking behind changing from the audio medium and taking that into the video space?
So I'd done a bit of video work for other people, on the QT without me being in it before, and I suppose it was something that I know nothing about. So I read a book and watched some YouTube videos, and how we all learn nowadays. And I just thought it would be fun. I suppose the main learning that I've taken away from it is how similar it can be to audio work in terms of editing, telling a story, putting the story together, but also how different it is to audio work. And that's something that I think that's the bit where the step up that I need to take, really, in terms of how to engage people in that medium, whereas I'm used to, as Natalia said, having people just listening to me through their earbuds, not having to somehow provide them with a palette of entertainment in front of them. It's very different, and I think it's something really a real learning curve for me. Absolutely. I don't think that video will kill the podcast star. I think it's another angle, another way of communicating. As Natalia said, so many different ways of communicating. It's certainly not going to destroy podcasting.
I was going to say, I've got a question on that. Like, how have you found that transition? How are the audiences in comparison for videoing compared to podcasting?
In terms of
in beer podcasting, beer video, because
in terms of numbers, or
yeah.
I think it's really early days for me. I only put my first video out 4 weeks ago. So I put one out each of the last 4 weeks, and that's that series kind of done. I think YouTube is something, again, that I'm not that familiar with in terms of putting out material on it, but apparently it's the second biggest search engine in the world, isn't it? So, but what I've found interesting is that with podcasting, I've tended to see most of my downloads on the day or the day after. With YouTube, it seems to vary, but that's a very early days experience of mine. So, you seem to get a little ups and downs here and there when somebody sort of discovers it in some way and then shares it again. So who knows, really? But yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think as people have said, they've been doing this stuff over Zoom, so video is more accessible for all of us now, and being able to, but as I think it was Adam who said, sharing the sort of live stream on YouTube, being able to do that is such a, so it opens up those doors even more.
Yeah, I was just going to make a point on that, really, that doing these things over Zoom, technically, if you're recording the audio, it records the video. And so you've got a nice, clean video thing that if you can bookend with your own branding. And as long as you've got a YouTube account and you can put a few search terms in, it's a very easy kind of accessible thing just to, add to your what you've got, but essentially. And we've got minimal numbers, but it's a very shareable thing to put on sort of Facebook. And if you've got a link that brings up that thumbnail, it's got much more visual appeal than just sticking a link in or saying you can get it where you always get it, sort of thing. I don't think anyone is really talking about that. I don't think anyone has really got a really good sentence for explaining where you can get podcasts from. Seems like people kind of go, you can get it from Apple and this, but what they say is, you know how to get it. Just go.
Yeah.
In terms of expanding the audience, I think video is more immediate for doing that than audio, isn't it? Yeah.
It's just not taking us really any more time to do that, and it's just, like I said, it's just giving you an extra angle.
Well, I suppose a lot of what we've talked about in this section has been about, sort of democratization of these medias for all of us, really, and also other people wanting to get involved in beer communication. And I suppose that links us loosely into our next topic to talk about diversity in beer and diversity in the industry. We're sat here, and I haven't got great views of everybody, but as far as I can see, we're all white. There's 4 women out of, I think, 14 participants in this call. Does that represent the beer industry or the craft beer industry? as it is? Are there some voices not being heard, and kind of if so, why? What are people's thoughts about that?
So I think, so when I first started drinking, I'm probably one of the oldest people in this, looking around at all the videos. So I started drinking officially in 1988.
It's been a big year for us this year.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. We're both fabulous at 50, darling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think way back then, definitely, I mean, if even if Zoom and whatever had been around then, yes, the amount of women in beer then would have been significantly different. So I think in terms of women coming in, I think it's good to see that there are more, and it seems to be more inclusive from that point of view. I think going back to some of the chats that we were talking about earlier about beer styles and getting the amount of beer styles that are out there, but also, so to expand on that, it's the fact that because of the tap rooms and because of some of the different pub stroke bar experiences that are out there now, you're able to try different styles. So it's not like you have to walk in like I used to have to do and kind of think, okay, which is the most inoffensive pump clip, which is the what roughly is the style that sort of makes the most, suits me the most. Now I can go, oh, I've not tried something like that before, and I can have little tasters. I don't have to buy a whole half pint or a pint. So I think, certainly from my point of view, things have improved. I would say I feel more comfortable going into certain establishments now. Not that I've always bucked the trend slightly. I've always been quite happy to be the only one amongst a bunch of friends that have drunk beer versus the whole wine, champagne, prosecco, cocktails, kind of cider kind of thing. But it is just nice to it feels a little bit more, I'm not being judged as much now as I probably was certainly in the 90s, shall we say.
I think you've made a lot of really interesting points there about women's access to beer, haven't you? In terms of, I remember being refused a pint in a pub once. It was, women only were allowed to buy halves in that pub, and I wouldn't expect that to happen ever again. But the way you talk about different beer styles has encouraged women into beer, different serve sizes. So you say you don't have to have a massive pint, you can have a smaller size. A lot of those things have encouraged more women in, and also hopefully going to somewhere where, in some places at least, you don't feel like an idiot if you want to ask about the different types of beers.
Yeah.
Nat, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Vicky's point. I got into beer sort of with the help of two female friends, actually, when I was in graduate school for public health, of all things. And that was in 2012. And so from sort of 2012 to 2015, I was having this really amazing beer journey, as we've mentioned, kind of going through this discovery of different beers and beer styles and breweries. And it never really stuck out to me that I was a woman who enjoyed beer. I always just felt very confident. I was finding flavors I enjoyed, and I wanted to then go seek out more of them. And it's only once I entered the beer industry that I realized that there are some women who don't feel that same way, that there are many women who do feel a barrier to maybe perhaps confidence or not seeing enough women like them in the space to make them feel comfortable to join us. And really then, it also helped me to realize how many wonderful women there are in the industry already too. So there are, people who feel like me, we love what we do, we're confident in the space, and other people who feel, oh, maybe that's not for me because I don't see enough women. And that's really what led me to start my podcast, Beer with Nat, which is just about speaking with women who work in beer about what they do and why they love it, to then help people see there are women who work in beer, who love what they do, who can teach you about beer, and really just to help you realize that if you're a beer drinker, there are other women who like beer too. So it's not just you. Come join this amazing community. And I always, always, always reference back to Melissa Cole's quote, if you can't see, you can't be. And so really the point of, doing things like this, whether it's for women, whether it's for people who are in the LGBTQ plus community, which, I'll speak to different organizations working in that space or people of color, it's all about visibility. So the space I'm familiar with is as being a woman. So I want to highlight other women who are in the industry. But of course, we can talk about Lily Waite, who's doing amazing work to help increase the visibility of the LGBTQ plus community in beer, and to raise funds for charities dedicated to, people who need help from those organizations. And there's been so much work this year, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, to make sure that we focus on communities of color. And Eugenia Brown in the States has started this amazing initiative called Road to 100 to get 100 women of color Cicerone certified with their certified beer server, so level 1. And she's had women from around the world who are advanced and certified Cicerones help to teach for free, to help pass on that education and help pass on the opportunities then that first level of certification allows for. So it really has been great to see this year all of these other people helping to provide opportunities for people of all different backgrounds to recognize themselves in the beer community and succeed in the beer community. So I think it's been a really, really great year for diversity in beer. We have a long way to go, yes, but we're definitely on the right track.
Absolutely, and again, you raised some really interesting points that you can't be what you can't see, or the signifiers that are around in the industry around who's welcome and who isn't, I suppose. And Vicky mentioned that with pump clips. That's such an obvious kind of thing. As for most of my beer drinking life, I've been around pump clips that are highly offensive to me, and that's starting to fade. But it was only at last year's Great British Beer Festival where they made a fantastic statement, putting their foot down about we will not have sexist or racist pump clips. That caused such an outrage in the national media that anyone would dare to make such a rule like that, as if women have to somehow tolerate that. Laura?
I think just to build on the points Nat was making about visibility, which I think are really important ones. You noted at the beginning, Emma, that it was 4 out of 14 of us. Quick little maths, that's almost 30%, which is much higher than the actual representation of women in brewing and in the beer industry. But what that says to me is that we are doing that work. We are 30% representing a smaller number than that, and that is great because we have this platform that we can use. And I think what we need to not do as a community as a whole, not just as women within that, but more generally, is not think that any work has been completed. We've achieved so much, but there's still such a long way to go. And I know Rachel, who organises the Women on Tap Festival, which is in Harrogate, she was pointing this out the other day, that the agenda needs to stay there. It's not something that you can think, oh, we've moved on to the next thing, the next issue, and leave the other one behind. It has to be conversations that we continue to build upon, keep having them, keep them in the forefront of people's minds, and keep being visible as well as just kind of being here, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And Luke?
Yes. So what I've done here is, amongst all the people talking on this topic, as the only white male in the group, I've decided to shut the hell up for most of it, just to try and set an example. But I think everybody's hit on exactly the right things. I mean, Laura, you're 100% right. Like this ain't over, and it's like you just look at the report that came out from the Brewers Association last year around diversity in beer, and the numbers are quite shocking. Like, we're a lot further behind a lot of other industries, and it is getting there, and we are making inroads, which is really good, and let's keep it positive. But I suppose from my point of view, I think it's time for the people with privilege to actually start realizing that this is the problem and doing something about it, and raising awareness about it, and also occasionally just shutting up and sitting down, because letting other people through and I looked at our stats for Rhythm and Brews of all the guests we've had on, and it is, to be frank, disgusting, the amount of non-white straight males that we've had on Rhythm and Brews. And it's something that I'm definitely committing to fixing from now on, when I actually sat down and looked at the numbers.
Good. Nat, you had your hand up. Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, I was going to say something different, which I will come back to, but just on Luke's point, I had someone reach out to me and pitch a man to come on my podcast, and I'm like, did you even look at who I speak to? Like I have said, I only speak to women for the purpose of giving them a platform and giving them visibility. So the fact that someone would even bother pitching a guest and clearly not know anything about the show, I was like, come on, people, this is part of the problem. You need to know that there are amazing women to speak to, and that's who I want to dedicate, the space to that I've created. But I just wanted to mention as well, building on the amazing statistics that Laura noted, we are slightly misrepresented in the sense of who we have here versus what the industry looks like. But incredibly, as Emma mentioned, this year's Guild of Beer Writers Awards, of the 18 different awards that were given out, 12 of them went to women. And I just, looked at that statistic and was like, yes, girl power, well done us. That 2/3 of the awards have gone to women. It's just really all about normalizing the fact that we love beer, we drink beer, we talk about beer. It's normal for us to be in this space, okay, gentlemen? We just want you to feel like it's cool to have us next to you, to talk about the thing that we love and to be knowledgeable about the thing that we love. It really, really frustrates me when I hear stories from female bar managers who say that, a male member of staff who just started yesterday would be trusted more over the woman who has been running the bar and buying in the beer for years.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that really frustrate me because we know what we're on about just as much as, or maybe more than, some gentlemen do in the industry. So yeah, really for me, it's just about creating that space and bigging up the voices who do know what they're doing, whether it is women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ plus community, to really make sure they're heard and they're valued as members of this community as well.
Absolutely, and I think it was amazing to see those winners the other night. It's such a different sort of group photograph than there has kind of, I think, ever been with the Guild Awards. I suppose what we've settled into, and which is perfectly natural, being mostly women in this group, is we're talking mostly about women and about diversity in terms of women, and that has progressed, I think, quite a way. It's as Laura said, that mustn't be lost, that progress. We mustn't just move on to something else and lose that progress. But I wonder if we can learn some of those lessons. I was talking to a black beer lover the other day, and he was sort of pointing out those same things that I've felt as a woman, that I've felt as a very obvious gay woman. When I've entered places, I want to see some signifiers that I'm welcome there, that this is a place where I am. And he pointed out to me kind of, you often go to tap rooms in big cities and they might be in the shadow of places where a very diverse population might live. But is that population in that tap room? Not always, not always. Often people are traveling to that tap room. A certain type of person is traveling to that tap room. It's not something that's open to the local community. And I wonder how, building on what Luke said earlier, how we take responsibility for moving those things forward, maybe learning what taking what we've learned as getting women into the industry, getting, some queer people into the industry, and how we move that forward, particularly in the light of what's happening globally this year in terms of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, but I think visibility, right? Visibility is the key, one of the keys here, and both in the online space. We've talked about the online space a lot here today, but obviously in the offline space as well. And things like the I am craft beer hashtag that kicked off last year, like absolutely phenomenal to see all these different from people of color and the LGBTQ plus space. Because, women are becoming more representative within beer, and you're exactly right. Those other marginalized communities just aren't and it's something that you just don't see those people in beer, and that is, I think, one of the big problems. And I think it's it's up to people, not only the people who run these institutions, like when you're walking into a bar, making sure that it's a safe space, making sure that it's a friendly space. But also us as patrons, making sure that we're not making these cliquey, spaces that are just the same homogenized faces, actually inviting more people and being proactive about it as well.
Absolutely. And Vicky?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of expand on that. I think it was Laura or Nat mentioned earlier on, a couple of hours ago now, about, I think when we were talking about beer stars, about the language of beer. And let's face it, that can put, as we've already discussed, but that can put a lot of people off, regardless of gender, diversity, colour, all of that kind of thing. So is there something, going back onto what Luke was saying, is there something about again, us not being quite so, it's very difficult when we're all podcasters and we're all here talking about beer. It's very easy not to get sucked into our own language and be very geeky about it. But when we're out in that, when we can finally go out into those public spaces again and be sitting there, what can we be doing to stop making it feel so cliquey and geeky? And, you know, is there something that we just have to do as part of our everyday vocabulary? Is, you know, not be snobby, not be geeky, not be and not kind of have a go at people if they don't quite understand what we're talking about initially. And surely that's the whole point, is we should then, you know, try and draw people in and, right, okay, well, would you like to learn more, etc. So but equally, as podcasters and beer educators and beer writers, etc., it's, there is that element of, like Luke said, what can we do next year now to, okay, how can we go out there now and bring in a wider audience? Is that, you know, maybe we ought to sort of be thinking amongst ourselves and be, you know, discussing amongst ourselves and sort of thinking, right, what can we do? How can we do this? You know, who do we get involved? We know that there are, and we were talking earlier, weren't we, about all, you know, we don't have to meet up with brewers now or other people in the industry. We can do it all on Zoom. Right, well, let's go and connect with them and, you know, let's start that line.
Absolutely. I think that's the question, isn't it? What can we be doing? I listened to a talk just before lockdown from Dr. Jackson Beckham from the US, who's you know, does incredible work around diversity in beer. And the thing that stuck with me from what she was saying was, you know, it's not enough for us to say we are committed to, you know, representing different people, or we are committed to no racism, no transphobia. No, that's not enough. That, you know, that's equivalent to me just saying that I'm really good at karate and I could take you out. I'm not really good at karate. Unless I put the work in, I never will be. So just saying these statements is just no good. At the start, when I set out with fermentation, I made the commitment that I will never ever release a show if it doesn't have at least another woman's voice as well as my own in it. And I've managed to stick to that. Apart from the ones where I've done single interviews, I managed to stick to that throughout. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. But what I've failed on doing is looking wider, looking outside of people who look like me, you know, people who have the same skin color as me, looking broader, looking at disability, looking at people who have different abilities, different skin colors, have different experience of the beer world, and wondering how we change that. One of my most powerful experiences in my beer career was walking into Great British Beer Festival last year and seeing rainbow flags and trans flags all over the place, absolutely all over the place. I suddenly thought, oh my God, it's okay here. It made me feel so different. And I think it's about, I think we have a responsibility to make those steps, make those changes. They don't have to be huge to make such a big difference. Nat, you had your hand up, and then to Luke.
Yeah, just building on what you were saying, Emma, I think as well, as a beer educator, I've got a few different thoughts that have been brought up from this conversation. But really the idea of the work that we individually have to do. So of course, with the Black Lives Matter movement earlier this year, I took a bit of time to kind of reflect and think about what do I know, what don't I know? And really learning the difference between equality and equity was, you know, those two words I didn't realize there was a difference. And this idea of giving everyone the same starting line is very different than giving people the opportunities they need so we can all access the same finish line. And really being able to then, as a beer educator, make my work accessible to people, because it is the language that we use that may set people off. People know what wine comes from and they know what cider comes from. They don't know what beer comes from. And when we're talking about things like DDH and Mosaic, what the heck is that if you don't even know what a hop is? So how do we continue to take a few steps back and use the language that welcomes people? And so this year I've gone to a few cider tastings and I know nothing about cider, but it's an important reminder for me to kind of be out of my depth and be like, holy cow, how do I learn about this whole new world? because I started learning about beer 8 years ago, and I feel I know a lot about it now. I don't know much about wine. I don't know much about cider. I don't know much about coffee. So reminding myself to be a novice at something has been really helpful to make sure that I explain things in a way that welcome people as opposed to put people off. And then also about, providing information for free or at a very affordable price and over the internet, which is this great connector, to be able to then welcome people into the space has been really helpful. And I am a huge advocate of buying beer at supermarkets, and it comes into that class piece as well. Beer is expensive, as we talked about earlier, but if you can find great beer in your supermarket, that's where you get started. Then yeah, you can go down the rabbit hole and go to your interesting craft beer shop nearby, but we need to have things that welcome people in at the point of purchase, and then we can get all geeky and interested after that. But we need to make that sort of level playing field and give the same opportunities to everyone.
I just got a message from Andrew who raised a really interesting point to me where let's take action, and especially for the visibility piece. Let's say if Beer Nation is going to happen again next year, it doesn't go ahead unless we have more than 50% representation from non-straight white males. I think that, we do, this is a really good, this is much better representation that I've seen in the beer community, but we could do better. And, I think that we should do better.
I think that's a good place to move on to our last topic, really, isn't it? Because we're talking about, what we can do, taking some action, making some change. It kind of builds on everything we've talked about all afternoon, where we are, where we've got to in the last 5 years, where we can, what kind of changes we can make, what kind of responsibility we hold, what we're going to be left with after COVID hopefully goes its merry way. But I think there are things that we can do, and maybe that has to be part of our predictions for next year, which we're going to talk about now, has to be our commitments for next year as well, about how we look at what we do, whether that's personally or in the beer stuff that we do, how we are in a different place, if not next year, definitely in 5 years' time, when Steve will have the energy back to corral us all back again to talk about things. But yeah, that is what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about predictions for the next 5 years, and I think it's been a tough call today to really focus on the last 5 years, because we've got this enormous concrete wall of COVID that has happened since March, that sometimes it's hard to picture in your mind's eye what it was like in the before times and what it might be like in the after times. It's so very difficult to look on that huge scale when, at the moment, speaking for myself anyway, my life has kind of shrunk to kind of that. It's really hard to for people who are listening, I've got my hands really close together. I'm doing video radio. Yeah, so my life has shrunk to barely anything. It's hard to have bigger picture of the past or the future. But I'm going to ask you all to do that now, to have some kind of predictions. What are we going to be drinking? How is the beer world going to look? Where are we going to be going? Adam, you're straight in there.
I'm just thinking more short term, and obviously let's just keep on this slight COVID thing. And I think as much as people are going to have to, all companies have to future proof, there's no more kind of scary world than there is now in terms of what you do in that. And I was thinking back to when this first kind of lockdown came about, and it's just to show how difficult it is to future proof, is that I was thinking, how are micropubs going to survive this when you got to be 2 meters away from everybody and your pub's probably 4 meters long? And then as things kind of evolved and changed, it became like the micropubs are actually the ones who are still open now in tier 3, and pubs have shut completely. And I think it's going to be in the next 6 months, people are going to be very cagey about just going, straight back to normal. We've got it's kind of gone away. I think people were thinking, well, when's the next one going to happen? Will there be a knock-on effect? And they're going to have to think about things like, do we need a plan for doing food? We don't currently do that. What is our delivery kind of, and getting a beer out to people if we can't open? And I think there's going to be a lot of thinking about what that is. And I think maybe as a consumer, there's probably going to be a lot more options for us as people have had to try and spread that risk, essentially.
Well, just following on from what Adam was saying there, I think disaster recovery planning takes on a whole new meaning these days. At work, we've had many scenarios, but the one which I think often got overlooked was things like pandemics. There was more in the City of London some sort of terrorist attack, or maybe something really banal like a blackout or a strike or a flake of snow on the line, for example. But now that people have considered it, I think that one of the trends will be people will be thinking long and hard about opening a bottle shop, a pub, somewhere which, you know, they may have thought long and hard about doing this before. They may think twice about doing it, but I think if they do it, they will make sure they have covered as many bases as they can predict they can. Take-ins, takeouts, delivery, online, various forms of dispense. I think people are going to think long and hard before they just open what, you know, Adam referred to as a micro pub. I think people will think long and hard about it going forward. The other thing I think that will continue is what we're doing now is using tech to get together. I don't think that's going to go because as pretty much everyone on here is going to go, yes, I want to go back to the pub. But this has been a real benefit as well. Because even if this was in normal times, to get all of us together would have taken a lot more work. And I would venture that, say, for example, Tom, who's become a dad recently, and even Ashley, who's a dad for months now, is an old hand practically, would be thinking twice about whether they could commit to a day out somewhere mutually convenient to literally chew the fat over beer, which will inevitably end up in getting drunk and a long train journey home probably. So this kind of thing I think is here to stay. And I think people will think long and hard about how they go about their business plans in the future.
Absolutely. Good points there. Vicky, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, mine's I have a wish and I have a prediction, or a hope. So my wish is that if we do a Beer Nation 2025, that we don't need diversity as a topic because it will be eradicated. We won't have to worry about, you know, what gender or colour or whatever we are. My hope is that when pubs can reopen, we will have some kind of hybrid where we'll have that. If you want to go up to the bar and order your beer, you can do, but if you want table service, you can also have that, and we'll use technology and all sorts of things for that. So you've got that. Hopefully, as consumers and customers, we will have that best of both worlds.
Building on what we achieved during this terrible time, the good things from the terrible time. Yeah. Andrew.
It's kind of building a bit on what Vicky said there and the discussions we've had earlier. I think sadly we are going to see the number of pubs decline over the next 5 years, I suspect, partly through COVID, partly through people not appreciating them. So what I would hope for the next 5 years, you're going to see pubs thinking about diversification. Now that's the people that they welcome in through their doors. You know, whether that's able-bodied, not able-bodied, whether that's, you know, beer drinkers or not beer drinkers. I think they need to seriously think about what they're offering. I think generally the number of people that are teetotal in the UK seems to be increasing. So what are pubs going to offer to these people that don't even drink alcohol if they're going to remain relevant and valid in their communities? So COVID will have pushed forward the thinking for a lot of pubs, I think, in terms of what they're offering and how they're trying to reach into their communities. So I think for the next 5 years, I'd like to see a continuation of that. How are pubs going to remain relevant and appropriate to the communities in which they sit in? If they want to survive, they've got to be thinking about that. And then my second sort of hope and expectation for the next 5 years, and I'm going to say it, is brown ales. So we're all going to be drinking a lot more brown ales in 5 years' time. But there we go.
Excellent, thank you. Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. I think my hope, and it's because things have shifted in a way that really tailors to my tastes, is that I just hope over the next few years, brewers and breweries just keep getting weird with it and just trying new things and really innovating and experiencing. I mean, the move towards pastry sours and these really sort of fruity experimental things is right up my alleyway. So, and I think that particularly reflecting on COVID and the closure of businesses and closure of pubs, there's a real risk that people say, actually, we need to revert to a model where volume is king. And that means we just need to just get the crowd pleasers out and we just go for the things that we know people want rather than trying something a bit different. So I just hope we steer clear of that and that the economy is able to steer clear of that. And then we can have those people that think, actually this might be awful, but we might learn from it. And actually we can afford to learn from it, rather than every batch that we brew needs to sell and needs to sell well to keep us ticking over month to month. So I just hope that everyone's able to stabilize to the point that we don't lose the momentum of innovation that we've seen in the last few years, because it's been incredible.
Absolutely, it certainly has. When we reflect back on the 5 years ago, it certainly has. Mark?
I just wanted to sort of add on, well, not add on, but just sort of back up Vicky's claim that I really hope that in 2025 we don't have a section on diversity. It was absolutely fascinating talk that you gave there on diversity. It was absolutely brilliant stuff. And yeah, as Vicky says, if we can get to 2025 without having to talk about that, and as Luke said, if we can have at least 50% representation across the board when we do this in 2025, which I'm sure that we will, 100%, then that would be absolutely fantastic. In terms of the tech, will it be Zoom? We don't know what tech is going to be like in 5 years' time. These sort of advancements that we've had in technology, even over the last 5 years, has been fantastic. So who knows?
I'm intending to be there as a hologram. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, we could all just be holograms doing this in 2025, which would be absolutely fantastic. And the only other thing I sort of wanted to touch upon is that in regards to a local aspect, I'm slightly worried about how the East Midlands is going to come out in the next 5 years, only because I know that Leicester has been sort of hit and miss. Leicestershire as a whole has been hit and miss as a sort of front for craft beer. So I do sort of worry about how the pubs in Leicestershire, particularly places in Leicester like the Two-Tailed Lion and the Blue Boar, how they're going to come out of this over the next 5 years or so. I'm not so worried about places like Nottingham. I think outside of Manchester, Nottingham's the best place for craft beer in the entire country. But even so, like a couple of places there are, at risk of closing down. So it is somewhat of a worry, especially across the East Midlands for us. So I would like to think that in the next 5 years, we'll still see a lot of those places, or at least see replacements for a lot of those places that live up to what we're experiencing now. But we'll just have to wait and see. It's very hard to predict.
Absolutely. Laura?
I just kind of wanted to tie in a little bit with what Ashley was saying. I completely agree. I really do hope that breweries are able to continue innovating and coming up with weird creations. And none of us have mentioned the B word yet. But I think post-Brexit, the availability of a lot of our key ingredients, a lot of things that are imported and that kind of thing is, at least in the short to medium term, I would say, have quite a big impact. So I think it's going to come down to breweries to think, what can we do to still get that range of flavors and still push the boundaries and still make exciting things without necessarily these additional costs. So potentially one thing that I've started to see quite a lot of this year is breweries working with cideries and other kind of, British ingredients. It'd be really nice to see a bit of an uptake in people using homegrown hops and that kind of thing. But that needs to come alongside a public understanding that it's not going to create a beer that's exactly the same. So I think breweries have quite a tough task ahead of them. But I think the resilience and adaptability that they've already shown this year, I hope, proves that they'll all be up to the task. And I think it could be a really exciting time for us to start playing around with things and seeing what we can get out of what we already have.
Absolutely. No, good point. Really good points there in terms of, we're facing another, dropping off another cliff at the point of recording, aren't we? So, let's hope, as you say, we've learned some lessons. Luke?
Now that craft beer is becoming a lot more mainstream, we've seen that with supermarkets and proliferation of breweries and some huge buyouts. Like, I'd love to see another small microbrewery boom, like we saw about sort of 10 years ago, similar to what happened with music when it kind of went mental 20 years ago. Because I think the more small breweries we have, that even if they just serve local areas, the more diversity we're going to see, the more not only diversity in people, but also diversity in beer and styles and experimentation. And I mean, that's what I'd love to see. Whether it's going to happen or not with everything else that's on the the horizon, who bloody knows.
Good points, though. Simon.
Yeah, what I'd like to hope that within the next 5 years is that I don't have to eat a Scotch egg in order to go to the pub for a pint. So I hope that kind of we get past that quite soon.
What have you got against Scotch eggs, Simon?
Nothing at all. I love them, but I don't really want to have one in order to go out for a pint. What I'd like to see, I mean, certainly, obviously, as Laura's already mentioned, the Brexit thing obviously is going to potentially change things quite soon. And I'm hoping that doesn't stop some of the more interesting ingredients coming into this country for us to make, really interesting and challenging and forward kind of thinking beers. But what I'd also like to see change as well is that as somebody who in normal times goes to a lot of gigs, I would like to see good beer available in gig venues. Which is still somewhere that, with the exception of places like Rock City at Nottingham, most of them you've got Red Stripe Guinness or something like that, and that needs to change. It really does. But I see also perhaps the future in things like Quake yeast also becoming more prevalent in a lot more beers, because not just because of different flavor aspects of it, but also the fact that it works a lot quicker than some of the other yeasts. And therefore, if people can kind of turn around beers quicker, that may well be to the benefit of the smaller breweries and stuff like that, really.
Absolutely. Nat.
Yeah, I just wanted to third Vicky's point about diversity. I also wanted to thank Luke for being a part of the conversation, because I do think it's really important that, sometimes people can feel uncomfortable in these conversations about diversity. And even as a straight white woman, I feel uncomfortable sometimes knowing that women have made progress in the beer industry and that we have other groups to look to help lend a hand to them and bring them into the beer industry too. So I think I would ask for all of us to make a commitment, whether it's guests on our podcast or whether it's listeners of the podcast, value someone's opinion, value what experience someone is sharing with you over a beer, whether it is why they like a certain beer or what they want to teach you about a beer. Just listen to people from all different backgrounds and make them feel welcome and make them feel part of our community. And that is how we will get to that goal that we're all looking forward to, this idea that we don't need to have these conversations about diversity anymore. It's just actually listening to people, and I think the reason we're all here together today is because we love beer, and beer brings people together. And that's part of the reason why I'm in the industry. So if we can make people feel welcome, that's really what we're all aiming to do. And I think for me, what I hope will stay, because I really have seen so much value in it, is online events like these. Whether it is it doesn't always have to be a podcast recording, but doing a beer launch and getting to chat with the brewer about their beer. That's an incredible opportunity to do from my spare room, or being able to, teach people about beer, whether they're anywhere in the world, whatever time zone they're in. I really think that this is something that, I've been living abroad. I'm from the States, and I would speak to friends over video calls, but never really do it in an industry way before. And I think this is really something that I hope sticks around for the next few years, because again, like we've said, it's about bringing people together. It's about connection, and we don't necessarily have to be in the same place. Although we would prefer to, we don't have to be able to keep the beer community growing and really giving back to what we love so much about it.
Absolutely. I'm keen not to leave anybody out of their predictions. Tom, you're a new father. You must be looking to your house must be full of future plans and thoughts. What's your predictions for the next 5 years?
Well, it wasn't something I was going to say with the new father take. I think something I discovered certainly a month before the due date was non-alcoholic beers and the strides they've made. And actually, I was trying to search out quite a lot, and I was impressed with some of the beers I found, non-alcoholic beers I found. So whether that's something again that just continues, in the next 5 years, would it taste exactly like a beer, or would it taste a bit like a beer still? But I think that's something that certainly, is really interesting, something that I've really got into, obviously because I needed to be sober to drive to hospital. So, and I think the other point I was going to make was something obviously born out of the pandemic is how our beer is served. Will we continue to have table service? Will we still be there at our table, logging into their app, purchasing the beer there and then at the table, and then it's brought to us? Is that something that will continue? I know I saw some places actually doing pour your own and buying at the, at the pump and stuff. It's a bit sort of innovative. Will that be something that continues to grow, or will it be a case of when we can go back to normal, will we just be at the bar? Because I do miss, especially some of our favourite locals, sitting at the bar and chatting to the barman and the other locals. I do miss that. But is that something of the past? Will it be now apps and table service? I don't know. But that could be something that progresses.
Yeah, good points. And Charles, what are your thoughts for the future or hopes?
Yeah, I think just echoing what kind of everybody has said, really. I mean, we hope for further diversification within drinkers and within the beer styles that we're seeing already. And it's going to be a tough road. I think the next 6 months are going to be absolutely crucial. Sadly, I feel we're going to lose a few breweries along the way, but I think there will be a period of stability, and then hopefully, we'll see a period of growth. But it's predictions. I mean, yeah, we don't know. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, the only person who's going to hold you to them is Steve, who's going to listen to this back in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
So, Steve, you brought people together 5 years ago. You've brought them together now. You've got that view of the past and the future. What are your predictions for the next 5 years?
I think it's probably something that strings together what we did in 2015 and what I mentioned at the beginning and where I see things going. And that's, I think we're going to see more breweries doing business to customer. So I think we're going to see more tap rooms. I think we're going to see more brew pubs. I think we're going to see more online services that go direct to the customer. And I think we're going to see more breweries, again, tapping into what others have said, using the virtual space to do beer launches. We've seen a lot of breweries have done that very successfully over the last few months, and it saves them money because they can, it doesn't cost to bring people to a venue to try your beers. You can send the beers out and bring everybody together online, and I think that's what we're going to see. I think that's a good thing that breweries have got closer to their customers. They've begun to understand their customers' needs and wants, and they've reacted to that. But I will end by saying I don't think that's ever going to be a replacement for the pub, because I think breweries should always put their beers into the pub to serve to the customer, to be enjoyed with friends.
Absolutely. Andrew, did you want to?
No, I'm glad you finished on that, Steve, because I think beer equals sociabilities for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely is. It's the drink that I want to be sat around drinking with people I know, I love, they're friends. So, yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. That it remains that drink of sociability.
That most convivial of drinks, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think, sort of, just to sum up, life has changed beyond recognition, not just in the past 5 years, but in the past 9 or 10 months. I think if we had suddenly appeared at the table of those 6 people you had in 2015 talking about the beer industry, if we'd appeared in our masks, staying 2 meters away, and told them what was going to happen by the time this event ever took off, they would not have believed us, and rightly so.
I'm thinking Bill and Ted there, Emma. It's like they've got into the phone box and they've gone back through, and people just don't know what's going on in the future.
Well, exactly. I mean, even if we told our own selves just a year ago, we would not have believed it. And I think hopefully this session today has captured some of that. Captured not only the devastation that COVID has caused in this industry that we love, and with this drink that we love, but also the learning that has happened in that time. We've all learned so very much. That's why we're all exhausted. But we've all learned so very much. And some of those changes, as you've highlighted, have been in some ways positive. I suppose what I hope would continue is like you say, things like this, whether it's in the virtual world or the physical world, this wish to connect and to support and to be part of a community. And I think beer has been around for 10,000 years. They're not going to take that away from us. This conviviality, this wish to come together to drink it and celebrate each other and celebrate the drink itself. And as podcasters, we are perfectly placed to do that. So thank you so much, Steve. and for pulling this together. It's been, an incredible event. It's been a really nice way to spend an afternoon, and hopefully it's an important kind of marker in the ground for when you come back in 2025 and look at how far we've got with our favourite drink. So finally, raise your glasses. Cheers.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, as always, for listening, and cheers to a safe, healthy, and happy 2021.